Hi everyone, thank you so much for attending the webinar. As you know, IDEXX, we are very keen to promote our continuing education and resources. And today we have the privilege to host, to have Nathan Seymour, our Associate Director from the Telemedicine Services, joining us today from the US to discover how IDEXX Telemedicine Services can support us on our case management challenges every day. Good evening, Nathan, how are you? And thank you
Good. How are you?
Very good, thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. We will hand over to you, Nate.
Thank you very much, Marco. Wanted to maybe give a short introduction of my background and then transition quickly into telemedicine, the business, and how we might be able to support the needs of veterinarians in Australia. So, Marco, thank you. My name's Nate Seymour. I'm in Portland, Oregon, and that might be a little confusing to people who know much about IDEXX, which is based out of Portland, Maine. This is the other Portland. It is on the complete other side of the country, but I do get back to Portland, Maine quite a bit. I joined IDEXX in 2012 as a commercial manager for the telemedicine business. So I've been in telemedicine for 8 years. I've been able to see this industry really expand, and this business itself and this way of practicing really take off, and I'm excited to share a little bit about it with this audience. So by way of agenda, a few things that I wanted to do. I wanted to first introduce IDEXX Telemedicine Consultants, sort of where we came from, sort of where we grew up, and then talk a little bit about what is it that we do and how do we do it. I think there's a lot of confusion out there around the terms such as telemedicine, telehealth, distance consulting, and the like, and I want to clarify what it is that we do and what it is that we do not do. I want to talk a little bit about how we are the worldwide preferred provider, explain a little bit about what that means, a little bit about the investments that we make to provide our service in what we think is a really, really elegant way, and then close up with how best to work with us, a little bit of tips and tricks about how to collaborate with our boarded specialists, how to get in contact with us if you want to learn more, and a couple of resources, and then I'll open up for a Q&A there at the end. I think most people are fairly aware of IDEXX. I wanted to give a couple of introductory points around IDEXX because I think they really resonate with our business and our offering particularly. Obviously, one of the really important parts about the IDEXX story is this legacy of innovation. We invest in the future of the profession. We've been doing it for a long time. We have a 30-year history of service to the veterinary profession, really committed to improving the lives of pets and people. I've been around quite a few different parts of this company, from R&D to the marketing professionals, sales side of things, to operations, and it really is a mission-driven organization. It's something that I've been really proud to be a part of, is recognizing that this commitment to improving the lives of pets and people is pervasive. It's everyone here. I think most people know that our sort of suite of offerings is this customized diagnostics, information management, and telemedicine solutions. And obviously, I'm here to talk about the telemedicine part of that. Another thing that I think will become clear as I talk a little bit more about telemedicine is that we make a lot of investment in the industry, and in particular in R&D. More than 80% of the industry's R&D investment does come from IDEXX. That goes into so many different things, from new diagnostics such as the SDMA, to improvements to our telemedicine, to our veterinary software and services. I think that we have a proven track record of taking really important solutions to the market. And that's true for telemedicine as well. We spend a lot of money on R&D for a relatively new business model. Moving more specifically into IDEXX Telemedicine Consultants, I want to give a little background on it. Why is it that I'm on the West Coast while the corporate office is there on the East Coast? It's because it really grew out of an acquisition. So back in 2004, a company called VDIC was founded in Clackamas, Oregon. VDIC stands for, or stood for, Veterinary Diagnostic Imaging and Cytopathology. It was an imaging center here in Clackamas, Oregon, which is just outside of Portland, Oregon, which is the bigger metro area. There was an MRI, we had a CT, there was a mobile ultrasound and a local ultrasound. And then there was a fledgling little telemedicine platform called vetmedstat.com. And you can see there the two founders. It's Dr. Mark Papageorge, who was a veterinary radiologist. Not pictured is his wife, who was a cytopathologist. And then Don Schofield is there on the right. That's actually still my boss. He's now the vice president and general manager of the telemedicine business for IDEXX. I've actually known him for quite some time. I've worked with him in different capacities before. In 2012, I was living in Seoul in Korea, and I had just finished business school, and he called me up and said, hey, if you're interested in moving back to the States, I'm looking for a commercial manager. And that's how I joined the telemedicine business back in 2012. But prior to that, in 2009, IDEXX acquired VDIC and then combined it with another distance consulting platform called CardioPet to create IDEXX telemedicine consultants, and used that vetmedstat.com platform to sort of expand the menu of distance consulting offerings under the telemedicine name. So now is the time to maybe clarify these definitions. What is telemedicine? I think the biggest confusion that we run across is people saying, oh, you have some sort of a platform for veterinarians to talk to their customers, to pet owners. That is not what we do in this business. I think another confusion people have said is, oh, you're the internal medicine specialist that we can call up on the phone and have a conversation with. Not quite there either. I want to go through this definition and start to sort of tease out what we do and what we do not do, and where we really show our strength and where we've focused our investment and energy. So we help veterinarians, meaning that we ourselves are not caring with patients. We help veterinarians care for their patients by connecting them to board certified specialists on a fee per case. It's not a subscription or anything like that, using this smart, easy to use technology. This is VetMedStat. So it's essentially a platform where veterinarians are allowed to submit any number of digital images or ECGs. We accept ultrasound, MRI, CT, and then submit them in with some patient signalment and after entering a history form. And we have a queue of specialists in the background that are ready to write a report and send it back out. We're available 24/7, 365, depending on the service. Oftentimes we can get a report back within an hour. Again, 24/7, 365. The reports themselves are detailed. I'll give an example of a report later on. I'll also talk a little bit about our team of specialists, but it's the largest group of specialists anywhere in the world, with approaching 200 specialists if you look at all of our disciplines right now. So with a little bit more detail here, I want to talk about the specific services that we offer. Radiology is obviously sort of where we started with the VDIC definition, including veterinary diagnostic imaging. It's still the biggest thing that we do. So radiology interpretation, just basic radiographs, that's the biggest thing under the radiology family, but we do CT and MR interpretation as well. We have a large and growing group of people that are specialists or who have spent a lot of time in cross-sectional imaging. We do ultrasound as well. We'll do a contrast study. Really what we have built our reputation on is digital radiography. And we have a group of, I think it's almost 125 now, radiologists that work for us in some capacity or another from all over the world. The service level for this, we think, is really, really important. Our goal is to get reports back as quickly as possible. So 24/7, 365, you can send in a radiograph to be read by one of our board certified radiologists all over the world. And you can choose between having that returned to you in 1 hour, 2 hours. We also have a routine service that's usually sort of same day, next day, depending on when you submit it. And then we have a non-urgent or a confirmatory service as well. The use that we have envisioned for this is things like a MET check or perhaps a history of lameness. So depending on sort of how your patient's doing, we're able to get that report back to you really quickly. We recognize that our stat service is the most important thing that we do. We recognize that getting that back quickly is hugely important. We guarantee that within an hour, get it back within an hour, pretty much 100% of the time, but our average turnaround time on the 1 hour radiology stat case is actually less than 30 minutes. And that's, again, like I said, 24/7, 365, wherever you are in the world. We have slightly different turnaround times for CT and MRI. We do have a stat, but given the huge size of these cases and the fact that moving them around on the internet sometimes takes a little bit of time just to download them, we return stats in a guaranteed 4 hours. It tends to be quite a bit faster than that, but just given the nature of these files themselves, we've committed to 4 hours, and we usually get them back in just a couple. That's our stat service there. We also have just a routine 24-hour turnaround as well. A really growing part of what we do is cardiology. The cardio PET service is really interesting. This was actually a part of IDEXX before the imaging service was brought on, before radiology was brought on in the acquisition. There was a service called cardio PET that had existed back into, I believe, the 80s. And then it was acquired by IDEXX in the 90s, and then combined with the imaging service in 2009. The old way of doing cardio PET was to hook up a patient to a 6-lead ECG, 4 physical leads, and then you would call up a call center. It was actually in New Jersey in the United States at the time. And you would wait on a hold, and then you'd get someone online, and then you would slowly, painfully transmit this thing over the telephone. In 2011, a lot of that call center was moved out to my office. And when I joined, one of the first things I noticed was that the entire office sounded like screeching fax machines everywhere. And so one of the first things I decided I wanted to do was stop that. It was such a frustrating sound all the time. So we went into R&D, made pretty significant investment to partner with a company to develop a Bluetooth device. I'll talk a little bit more about that in the future or in later slides here in the presentation. But we no longer do the telephonic transfer of ECGs. That's been several years since we've discontinued that. But we do have this really nice Bluetooth device. It's about the size of an iPhone case. We're able to record an ECG and transmit it and submit a case to our cardiology service in about 2 or 3 minutes, depending on where you are and what your broadband looks like. And our cardiology service, in relation to those ECGs, we have a couple basic categories. One is what we call an ECG screen. This is a somewhat limited information report, and the turnaround time is meant to be relatively quick. I think depending on where you are in the world, this may vary because it is sort of extended US hours, but it's not 24/7, 365. But the idea with the screen is it's essentially a go, no go for anesthesia. It's a check for arrhythmias. Is there some electrical abnormality that might change my decision to go to anesthesia for this patient? And I'll go into a little bit more detail on that in coming slides. The other service that we offer is a full consultation with the cardiologist. This is the more robust report. This is a 24-hour turnaround time on this. Our cardiologists prefer that you submit this ECG using the device and combine any imaging that you can get as well. So if you have thoracic radiographs, if you do an echo, combining this with the ECG allows our cardiologists to provide a really detailed report. When appropriate, there might be a full case workup and treatment recommendations, potentially follow-up when necessary as well. So this is sort of a full consultation with a cardiologist working up that case, which really allows a veterinarian who may not have a specialist nearby or who doesn't have the confidence to deal with potential cardiac issues to have the confidence of working with a board-certified cardiologist on that case. I'll go into those a little bit more in later slides, but I want to talk about a couple of other things that we have going on. I know that to varying degrees, much of the world is in some sort of a lockdown right now, and the ability to move both customers and their pets around to different specialists is somewhat constrained. At least that's something that we've been dealing with pretty heavily here in the US. And this is where I think that we can really add a lot of value as well. We do have a whole group of internal medicine specialists. They can do an interpretation of an abdominal ultrasound, or even just look at the blood work and provide a written report for the patient record that will help you work up that case. So if you ever have a need, or if you ever have a question of an internal medicine specialist that you really want to get a full workup from them and have it documented for your patient record, internal medicine consults are something that we can offer there. We also have dermatology. I know that one of the major drivers of visits here in the States is sort of the itchy dog. And so we do have a dermatologist. You can snap a picture and submit that with a case here, and you can get a written report from a dermatologist. And then lastly, we do have a couple of dentists as well. So I know that sometimes a routine dental can get tricky really quickly. And so if you ever have a question that you think a dentist could help put together a treatment plan for, or if you need someone to look at dental radiographs, that's another service that we offer. Like I said earlier, we are all over the world. As you can see, primarily based in the US and Europe, but we have definitely expanded that. I believe that this map right here is actually a few months old, and I think that we've expanded quite a bit beyond this as well. So as a group, we do a lot of outreach to the radiology and cardiology and specialist community. Our goal is to build a community of boarded specialists and those with some sort of specialty medical insight, and be known sort of on the community side as a place for people to share information. It's a really remarkable thing for me. I don't have a medical background, but I'm on our leadership team, so I get brought into a lot of conversations. I'll be brought into a discussion on a particularly challenging case, and I'll look through and I'll see 30 or 40 radiologists collaborating on an email for a single case. And I think there is something beautiful about the numbers, and you get these emergent qualities in your team when you're really focused on not only collaborating well with our customers and veterinarians, but also with each other to really learn from each other. And I think that that's a real strength of how we have built up our community of specialists. So why do people use telemedicine? In the US and Canada, and particularly for radiology, it's becoming a standard of care that most radiographs are reviewed by a radiologist. It's really exploded, especially in the last few years. And one of the challenges that we face now is there's less than 1,000 boarded radiologists in the world, but the demand for radiologist interpretation of radiographs, especially in North America, is skyrocketing, just as people start to see the value more. So what is that value? Why is it growing so quickly? Ultimately, it is about sort of being the long arm of a practice into all of these specialty disciplines, allowing a general practitioner or any practitioner, wherever they are, to have access to really this collaborative community of specialists at any time. We see a few things that come out of collaborating with radiologists. Obviously, one of the biggest ones is the ability to access the insights of a boarded radiologist at any time. The confidence that comes from knowing that you're not missing anything. You have someone there who's going to collaborate with you on a case, whether that be thoracic films and a cardiologist, or if it's an abdominal film and you're wondering if it's time to go to an exploratory surgery, you can talk to a radiologist. That confidence, I think, is really the main reason why people use it. But as people use it, and I think this is one of the things that's driving the growth here in North America, they start to recognize some other things as well that have less to do with just the confidence. They start to realize that as you package this with your radiographs, it actually grows the business as well. It's a pretty easy thing for people to agree to when you're saying that you'd like to get the opinion of a radiologist when you're taking radiographs. So it's an easy, high compliance way to grow the business. The other thing is it actually makes a team in practice more productive. Instead of pulling people in to look at a set of radiographs and wondering what's going on, and maybe spending a lot of time sort of trying to build up the confidence in your interpretation of a set of radiographs, you just know every time you're going to have a written report from a radiologist on it. So you spend less time on radiographs and more time with patients. The other thing is you actually get better at looking at radiographs when you've been not only looking at them, but also hearing from a radiologist what they see. So there's sort of continuing education from collaborating with radiologists. Same thing goes for collaborating with cardiologists. I think an ECG can feel like a black box, but after a while of working with a cardiologist, looking at a lot of ECGs together, you start to feel a little bit more confidence there. The other one, and this is really surprising, is it drives an intelligent path towards more diagnostic testing. I think that this has been the one that we hear that surprises people the most. They incorporate telemedicine as a standard of care, and the next test to sort of work up that case becomes an easier suggestion to the pet owners, because it's a lot easier to confidently suggest maybe that ultrasound when a radiologist said, you know what, I really think that you're going to know a lot better after you've done an ultrasound. And then finally, the last one is it creates a really complete patient file. I think as people start to adopt this more as a standard of care with radiology, they recognize that their patient documentation just feels a little bit more complete when you've got a specialist's report in there. So now I want to talk a little bit about where we as a business focus our attention on what we think is really important, where we invest our money in trying to improve our service, in trying to make sure that we do a truly exemplary job in the marketplace as we provide our services. And that's really in three categories. Quality assurance is hugely important to our medical leadership, and I'll go into that a little bit more, but the other thing that we've spent a lot of money on is our 24/7, 365 support. This is actually a follow the sun strategy. We have live technical and customer support available anywhere in the world at any time of the day, 24/7, 365. And then lastly, like I hinted at earlier in this talk, we spend a lot of money on R&D and technology. And some of that has already come to fruition, and we have some really, really cool things to share and to show that we think make our service really, really nice to use. And then some of them are in development right now, and I think that it will really change how people interact with specialists' report in the future. So I want to go through each of these one by one, and then I have a couple slides giving a little more detail and context on this. So on the quality assurance side, case review is a huge part of how we ensure that our team is providing the most accurate and helpful report possible. Dr. Don Thrall actually wrote literally the book on veterinary radiology. He wrote the first and sort of the main textbook on the topic. I think a lot of people are familiar with that name, and he sort of heads up our quality assurance program. He's pulling cases randomly every month just to make sure that we're keeping our standards high, does case reviews as well with the people that he thinks can use a little bit of coaching. We also score and track all of our cases and provide feedback to the radiologists who have been reviewed, just to sort of quantify our accuracy. And this here, it says our overall error rate, we're talking about non-clinical, really minor, and in some cases up to major, is less than 5%. And so when we're talking about non-clinical or minor, we're talking about something that really could be a judgment call for a radiologist. We're talking about minor, it's probably an incidental finding, so that's included in that 5%. And major is, we just drove straight past a lesion. That does happen, but it's much less than 1% of the time. And I think that's a testament to the investment that we make in quality assurance, and that rate is actually significantly lower than human side radiology. On the support side, like I had mentioned, we do have 24/7, 365 support. We offer a lot of radiology and cardiology on the IDEXX Learning Center. We have a dedicated account management team. We'll meet someone who will be a resource for anyone who's interested in learning more about telemedicine, some of the practical, how to get started a little bit later here. We recognize that being accessible and being available is really important to people taking on this new way of looking at working with specialists. And then finally, on the technology side, I mentioned earlier the CardioPet ECG device. That was a multi-year project that resulted in a huge transformation of our business and ultimately a huge improvement to it. Radiology as well, we're in the process of a pretty intensive project investing in how we serve cases up to our radiologists. I'll give you an example later on of some of the challenges that our radiologists can face as they're interacting with thousands and thousands of customers with different sort of visions for what collaboration looks like. We're going to provide a little bit more guidance there. And then I think the thing that we're most excited about is there's a huge opportunity to have a radiology report be more than just a PDF or a fax or just a static file. We think that there's a whole world of interactivity that can make a radiology report come alive. And that's something that we'll be happy to announce very soon. So dig real quick. Like I said, radiologists are our business on the radiology side, but they're human, and quality assurance is absolutely important. I spoke a little bit about Dawn Thrall and our random sampling of cases. We also focus on our onboarding of new radiologists. Not every radiologist was trained in the same school, not surprisingly, and they have different visions for how to communicate and how to interact and how to collaborate. We actually put them through a really rigorous onboarding and quality control process as they come in. So all radiologist candidates first read a series of cases as part of the interview process. In some ways, obviously being a boarded radiologist is a precondition for joining our team. It's not sufficient. We hold our radiologists to an extremely high standard. We work on report alignment prior to reading the cases. For the first little bit of their employment with us, all of their cases are being overread by a senior member, scoring and tracking the cases and providing sort of real-time coaching. And to be entirely honest, not all radiologists make it through our review process. It's extremely challenging to join the team. We believe that it's an honor to be part of the team. And in those unfortunate and rare cases, we have had to say, you know, our standards are high enough at this point that we don't think it's the right fit. Moving on to the support investments that we've made. Like I said, 24/7, 365, follow the sun support strategy. We actually have a couple of support folks in Sydney as well as a couple in the Netherlands. We have some on the East Coast and the West Coast of the United States. So there's never a time of the day, never a day of the year where we don't have someone available live for technical and customer support. An investment that we made a few years ago and really has, I think, created a better customer experience for everybody that's been working with us. And then in those investments, I want to dig in just a little further on this CardioPet ECG device. As we talk about how you can maybe get in touch with us in the future, this is something that we'd be happy to talk a little bit more on and give maybe a demo. But this device allows you to capture an ECG using 6 leads simultaneously. I think, like I mentioned, the capture and submission process takes just a few minutes. You can view, save, and submit the ECG on vetmedstat.com, which is a portal for all of our collaboration. And it is the preferred way to work with our cardiology team. I want to talk a little bit more about the services that we offer here real quick. We talked about the full consultation, and I hinted real quick at the other service, which is the screen. We've seen hundreds of thousands of ECG screens, and we've been digging into the data. And one of the things that we've learned is that 1 in 20 dogs and 1 in 25 cats do have an arrhythmia. And in some cases, we know those are being missed on physical exam. We know this because people are adopting screening in increasing numbers, and we're discovering things that have been missed on the physical exam. So as you're thinking about this device, or if you're interested in learning more about cardiology, please keep in mind that in addition to the consultation, we do have a lower cost, sort of quicker turnaround time screen available. We sort of envision that as either screening for sort of baseline ECG or most likely in a pre-anesthetic setting. All right, I want to move on to how to work with us. Renee, are you on the line? Would you like to walk through how to get in touch and sort of how to interact with us?
Yeah, thanks, Nate. I am your guys' dedicated account manager for telemedicine, so main contact for anything in telemedicine. I'm also based in Oregon, even though I'm not as close to the office or there. The easiest way to get a hold of me since I'm in the States is to go ahead and send me an email. communicate that way so that I can reach out via phone. It just seems to be the easier way to communicate. I would be your contact to set up anything through VetMedStat, which is the slide that you're seeing right now. Did you want to walk through that a little bit, Nate, or do you want me to go through that part of it?
Why don't you go through? I think that the main point is this is the sort of first entry point into creating an account and working with telemedicine, whether it be radiology, cardiology. But you can talk through some of the details if you are interested. Anything you think is important?
Yeah, so VetMedStat is the main landing page where you would go to set up an account. You once you set up and put in all of the clinic information, you would then be all set up to go. There's a couple different ways that you can submit to VetMedStat. So just have to make sure that that gets set up from your X-ray system, ultrasound, whatever modality it may be. And that's all scheduled through me. Sometimes support is looped in, but for sure, once that account is set up, then we can kind of go from there.
So Renee, you want to give a little background on how long you've been with IDEXX Telemedicine? And
yeah, for sure. So I was my whole complete background is I was a technician for 14 years in practice. So came from practice and made my transition to IDEXX about 4 years ago. When I started with IDEXX, I was doing what we call in the States field support. So installing the analyzers that are in the practice. And then almost a year and a half ago, I transitioned over to the telemedicine team. And that's pretty much that's all. Yep. When I had started with Australia, I was super excited to cover that area. But I did find that having that email is just the easiest way to contact. So it's listed there on the slide too.
awesome. So I think the takeaway here is if you're interested in learning more or setting up an account or walking through some of the practical details of starting a collaboration with any of our specialists, email Renee. She is an expert at getting people set up, letting them know things, questions around pricing, questions around turnaround times, any sort of technical connectivity, all of that. Renee is the way to go.
Thank you, Nate.
Thank you. So let's assume then that we have set up an account, you reached out to Renee, great conversation, learned things about telemedicine you never thought that you would know, and now it's time to submit a case. This is something that I want to point out about collaboration. This is the PSA from our medical leadership team here, how to get the most out of a collaboration with a specialist. There's a million ways of doing it. Some of them are great. Some of them are sort of equally great. There's a lot of variation, but there's also some common traps that people fall into. This is absolutely one of the most common traps that people fall into, which is attempting to share everything that you could possibly know about the patient with a radiologist or a cardiologist. You can imagine if you're a radiologist and you're looking at 30, 40, 50, 60 radiographic studies per day, and this history pops across your screen, your eyes are going crossed immediately. I'm having a hard time looking at this myself, and most of these words are fairly lost on me. What I want to point out here is that not all information is actually useful to the radiologist or helpful in their interpretation of the film. Our medical director actually took this history and pulled out what is actually interesting to the reading of the radiographs. You can see here that, what is that, maybe 10% of the history in this case was something that actually led to an improvement in the radiologist's ability to actually respond to the case and write the report. I've been very interested in histories for the last several years as I've been working on a series of forms that allow for histories to be created sort of efficiently and get the radiologists exactly what they need to know more. I've come across some really, really interesting things in histories. A lot of times they have been cut and paste from the patient record. I've seen descriptions of earwax. I've seen text messages that have been cut and pasted in that actually are not about the patient. So the reminder here is please do be very careful to get the radiologist the necessary and sufficient information while keeping in mind the fact that they are looking at multiple patients and are keen to get on to cases. I mentioned earlier that one of the investments that we're making right now is in guidance around histories. Keep an eye out for that in the coming months. We have been in a multi-year project to help to put together smart forms that represent the sort of totality of what a radiologist is looking for in a history. So the idea then will be to guide you through the creation of a truly perfect history from the perspective of a radiologist or a cardiologist. Currently, it is sort of a text box where we ask for you to use your judgment. In the future, we'll be providing some more guidance on that. We'll also be providing a little bit more guidance on imaging and positioning. So keep an eye out for all of that. Another thought here, and this is really more of an attitude that our radiologists really want to be able to impress on people. This truly is a collaboration. We're not necessarily a box to be checked where you just sort of send off the images and we can figure out everything just by looking at the images. We do want those histories. So while I just cautioned to please be cautious in what you submit, we do want the history. And if you do have questions that are more specific, in the case submission process, there's a notes to specialist box. This is a way for us to have a little bit more of an informal collaboration. These notes do not show up on the final report. So if you're planning on sharing them with a pet owner, you can have a degree of privacy here in your collaboration with the radiologist, cardiologist, or internal medicine specialist that you're working with. So think of this as sort of the hallway conversation. You do have the ability to have that more informal interaction with the radiologist or the cardiologist, and we definitely appreciate more communication on that level. If you have a hunch or if you have a concern, put it there. I want to real briefly go through a sample report. As you can see here, this report was actually created using our history guidance. You can see a very clean history here. It's in a few categories: primary complaint, vitals, the history itself, physical exam, diagnostics, treatment, and others. So this was built up with some guidance that we're going to be making more available in the coming months. And then this gets served up to a radiologist, and then the second half of the report here always remarks on the images that were received. Obviously, we're going through a radiology case right here. And then there's three sections. There's a findings section, a conclusions section, and a recommendation section. So you can get an idea for sort of the level of detail that might happen in a relatively straightforward request and report here. And as we sort of wrap up, I want to give you a couple of additional resources to consider as well. The IDEXX Learning Center and all of the great learning resources that are available in the IDEXX family has telemedicine content as well. This is a sampling of some of our cardiology continuing education offerings that we have, recorded webinars in many cases, sort of pre-anesthetic cardiovascular screening, ECG screening, wellness ECGs, cardiology in your practice, and cardiology rounds with Dr. Allison Adams, who's also our Associate Medical Director. Please do look out for that sort of information. We create a lot of content, and we think it's really, really high quality, and you can learn a lot from it. Also on the cardiology side, there's a cardiac education group that has a ton of content for managing heart disease in your practice. Highly recommend. This is a collaborative effort with IDEXX and a couple of other industry partners. really, really great content for learning more about heart health, and some ideas for how to collaborate with cardiologists as well. With that, I want to open it up to questions. If you have any questions about how to work with us, or about how our offerings can add value, or what it is exactly that we offer, I'll go ahead and pause and give you some space to ask those.
We don't have any other questions. We can call this a close. Thank you so much, Nate and Renee, for your time. This was a really informative session. If you're waiting to view this session again, the recording will be placed on the website.